What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good With Project. I'm your host, Jared Scarlato, and today I want to talk to you about gaining perspective with Jedi mind tricks. The reason that this is important is because we're all individuals and we all lose perspective on what is important versus what we deem to be important. A big reason why we do that is because many of us focus so intensely on the problem. We don't shift our mind to a solution. We grasp onto the problem, we hang on to the problem, and even if we somehow pull our way through the problem in a drudging, slow, methodical kind of way, we still grasp onto it and hang on to it. We still let it hang with us. It still becomes baggage or luggage, if you will, instead of letting those things go as we move on. Or if it's even small and insignificant and really not that important, we tend to let it bother us and bug us. And it's by accumulating those small insignificant instances that we put out of perspective, that we blow out of perspective, that we slowly but surely tend to view life through a not so supportive light. Like I talked about last week, there are 7 billion people on Earth. So there are 7 billion perspectives or windows to be able to view through. Your view, your window, is only one out of 7 billion. And even of those 7 billion, I'm sure that we haven't viewed reality as best we can or as expansive that we can. So I'm not suggesting that you need to go out and view things 7 billion different ways, because of course that would be terribly unproductive. But the goal is to understand that the way that we think and how we're thinking about, especially the problem that we're currently caught up in, is just the way that we're used to thinking about it. It's just the way that we currently think about it. But since we are us, since we are only us, and we can only ever be us and view things through our lens, we lose perspective. And that's what happens. It happens sometimes daily for people, sometimes moment to moment, sometimes on big things, sometimes on small things. But the goal is to be able to trim it down so eventually it's only the big things that you really put out of perspective, which is fine, especially if it's something new. And that's the thing. When it's something that you have not overcome yet, when it's a new problem, a new challenge, a new obstacle that you're trying to beat, okay, you can lose a little bit of perspective, but as long as you rein it back in and recognize that it's not as big as you're making it out to be, number one, and number two, because you're making it out to be so big, you're actually holding yourself back. You'll just have a hard time continuing to move forward. But nonetheless, we want to be able to let go and let loose of as much luggage as possible so that we're not hanging on to a bunch of shit that is dragging us around. Because there's a line in this book. This is called Looking Out for Number One by Robert Ringer. I was reviewing my notes for the book recently, and I came across a passage, which I actually lost because I closed the book. But I came across a passage that reminded me of my own instance of having to gain perspective. Because again, like most people, I lose perspective as well. I've worked on it. And when I lose perspective, I remind myself to work on it again. That's the way that life works. You're in constant motion toward getting better, toward improving, never actually achieving the thing. It's never gone. It's not like all of a sudden you're going to quit blowing things out of proportion. You're just hoping to continuously get better about it. And the way that he frames it in the book is like airline luggage. He said, you need to learn to let things go because, like the airlines, nature charges extra for extra luggage. Nature charges for extra luggage. And unless you're able to pay the price, which most people aren't and shouldn't want to pay the price, then you need to learn to lighten the load. And that's the goal. It's to lighten the load. It's to be able to let go of some of that extra luggage so that you can chill, so that you can have a more relaxed and a more fulfilling life. Because if you're just hanging on to a bunch of stuff and and constantly blowing things out of proportion, there's never going to be a time where it just stops. Life is life. No matter if you're 20, 40, 60, 80, or 100, there is an obstacle somewhere ahead of you. And so if you continue to hang on to everything behind you, that means you're just going to keep accumulating stuff, and life is just going to continue to get heavier and heavier. So we want to be able to lighten our load so that we're not paying a price that we have to pay. We're not paying the price that nature is going to make us pay no matter what. The question is, do you want that price to be excessive, or do you want it to be what it's going to be? So that's the goal. Before we get to the rest of that, I'll encourage you to hit pause real quick, go give us a quick review, or hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube, because as always, the more reviews or subscribers that we have, the more people we get to reach, the more people can gain perspective on what's going on in their own lives so that they can quit blowing shit out of proportion and making it harder on you, because we all also know that person who blows everything out of proportion, and you're just like, oh my gosh, you hurt my head just thinking about, just listening to you talk about how big of a deal you think this is. It's hurting my head. So the more people we reach, the more we all get to gain a better perspective and be able to look at life through a different lens. So thank you for giving us a review and for subscribing. Definitely appreciate you guys. Always appreciate your time that you put into this, especially. But yes, we want to be able to gain a better perspective. And it is worth reminding ourselves that this is a moment-to-moment decision. Remember, all human beings are fallible. All human beings have instances where it's just like you do something and you're like, oh, that was dumb. I don't even know why I thought that way. I don't even know why I blew that out of proportion. I don't even know why I did that. And if you just say, well, I guess that's just the way I'm going to be, I've tried working on it before, but it seems like that's just the way that I am, then that's just the way you're going to be. But if you understand that everything that you do currently, every way that you think, every perspective that you have, every belief that you have, every thought that runs through your mind, it's all habit. It is all habit. And while none of it is easy to change, it is all changeable. You can shift all of it, but it requires a moment-to-moment choice to do it. It requires a moment-to-moment choice to make the decision, to pay attention, to use these Jedi mind tricks to overcome blowing things out of proportion so that you can let go of some of that luggage. So let's talk about a couple of ways that we can do that. Like I said, we're going to use some Jedi mind tricks to gain a better perspective. And by tricks, I don't mean that these things are fake. What it is getting our mind out of its own way so that we can think differently. Because like I talked about last week, we have these things called cognitive biases that are built into our brain from hundreds of thousands of years of evolution that were useful hundreds of thousands of years ago, but aren't as useful today. They can be sometimes. They make our lives a lot simpler sometimes, but at the same time, they make our lives a lot harder. Negativity bias, for instance, makes our life very challenging because if we're constantly viewing things through a negative light, why the fuck would we go try and do anything? Well, I'm just going to screw up on everything. Well, it's just going to be so hard if I go try and do this. Everyone's going to judge me. I'm going to run into problems. I'm going to fail. Things are going to go bad. You'd never do anything, and that's where a lot of people are. So learning to overcome those those cognitive biases is important. And sometimes you have to trick yourself into doing that. And again, tricking doesn't mean that it's fake. It is real. But if you want to get out of your own damn way and you want to make progress, sometimes you just have to go, okay, how can I change this so that I can move forward? Am I blowing this out of perspective? Generally, the answer is yes. So that's what I mean by Jedi mind trick. It is not a trick in the sense that it is fake. When you do these kinds of things, you're actually putting things into perspective. It's actually the opposite. You're blowing things out of proportion is what's happening. So you're actually looking at things more realistically when you are using Jedi mind tricks. So let me grab a quick drink and then we'll jump into our first one. Excuse me. The first one is probably the most popular. It is simply just reframing the situation that you're in. Whatever the circumstance is that you find yourself in, that you're blowing out of proportion, it's reframing it. And again, maybe you're not blowing it out of proportion. Maybe you're looking at it because it is actually a detrimental thing. Maybe it's actually something that's challenging. For instance, maybe you've been diagnosed with some level of cancer. We'll call it maybe stage 1 cancer of something, which is not, of course, that's a serious diagnosis. That's something that definitely is challenging and definitely brings some sort of fear with it. So maybe it's not that you're necessarily blowing it completely out of proportion, but if you're not gaining perspective on how you can go about making the future productive, then we run into a problem. So here's how that might look. And this is me coming up with an example. I have not been diagnosed with any level of cancer, so I'm not assuming that this is easy. Again, sometimes things are challenging. Many times we blow things out of proportion and we need to reframe them, and they're small things. You get a flat tire, which is no fun, and you lose your freaking mind about it. But at the end of the day, you can go, okay, yeah, this sucks. It's no fun. That's fine. But I can get my tire changed. When you're diagnosed with cancer, it's a different thing. So if you're diagnosed with cancer, your mind, of course, will automatically go to the worst thing. Its negativity bias will take over and it will go to the worst thing possible, and that is death. I'm moving toward death, and I'm doing it at a very rapid rate. Of course, at that point, you don't really know because all you've been told is that it is this thing. So how you might gain perspective on that, or how you might reframe it, is not by going, oh, how do I view this from a happy light? That's not reframing. That's not what I mean by this, because that is also unproductive. If someone's like, oh, just think about the positive. Well, okay. Let me see. The positive of having cancer is, yep, having trouble here. So that is also not productive, but it is affirming what's happening while being able to decide on how to go about it next. Because if you just let your emotions take over and you run straight down that emotional road, then you won't effectively utilize the future. You won't effectively put your efforts into a place that maybe you get out of this thing, or you make the whatever has to happen moving forward. So it's affirming what's happening. Okay, all right. This diagnosis has happened. This is scary. I'm feeling a little fearful right now. All of that is true. It's not ignoring it. It's not pushing it to the side. It's not trying to flip it and think positively. It is recognizing that it is the truth, that this is what's happening. And this is how I feel about it. And then it is taking the next step and going, okay, now where do I go from here? Now where do I go from here? While I recognize that this is what's happening, this diagnosis has happened, and I'm afraid of it, what's the next step that I can take? What's the next step that I need to do? What's the next appointment I need to take? What's the next? So it's getting yourself back into a mode of being able to, again, making the best out of it, if you will, but it's not ignoring the fact that it's an intimidating circumstance. You see? So that's reframing. It is affirming what's happening, but it's also at the same time figuring out what the next steps can be so that you can make the best out of it. Another thing that is very useful when it comes to reframing is literally asking yourself in a way that makes you reframe the 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 question. So, for instance, if I were to ask you what you would do to lose weight, you would tell me that you don't know. Well, I don't know what to do to lose weight. I've already tried everything. Or if your goal was to grow your business and I were to ask you, well, what do you need to do to grow your business? You'd go, well, I don't know what I need to do. I've already tried everything. But if I were to ask you what you would tell your friend to do, if your friend came to you and your friend was trying to lose weight, what would you tell your friend to do? You would be able to list off 20 things just like that. Because when we view things from a I perspective, we don't like being wrong. We don't like feeling bad about ourselves. So I feel better convincing myself that I've tried everything than whatever, trying to come up with something else that's not going to work. But you know what to do. So when you reframe it and you look at it through a friend lens instead of a you lens, then you can more likely actually get something out of it. You can more likely come up with an answer. So that's another way that you can reframe it is by asking the question in a non-direct way, in a way that doesn't put it on you, but instead you're like, okay, well, if Tom were doing this, then what would he do? Or if I were gonna help Sally make this decision, what would I tell Sally to do? So that way your subconscious mind isn't going like red lights are flashing and it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Well, I can give advice to somebody else all day long. So what advice would I give them? Write it down and then go, okay, well that's what I'll do. And that's another way to reframe it so that you don't lose perspective on what's actually happening. You know what to do, you don't like to attack yourself. So you're avoiding it. So that's reframing. Very, very effective, very useful, and a great way, again, to actually move through problems instead of just sitting on them. So another thing to do is to understand the relativity of your problem. It is a problem relative to what? Now, this is more useful for, again, those medium to small problems. If you're talking about higher level issues like cancers and deaths and things like that, you can use this one for that, but that's not what I'm suggesting necessarily. But it's a relative to what? So if you have a level of pain, let's say you broke your toe and your toe hurts and you're catastrophizing it and you're just talking about how terrible the pain is. Yeah, relative to what? It's relative to, if you were on fire, I don't know. I feel like that'd probably hurt pretty bad. If you broke your femur instead of just your toe, if you broke like 5 ribs, if your tailbone was cracked in half, like the pain is relative to what? And that's what putting it in relative terms means. Oh, this problem is so hard. I can't believe that. Well, it's relative to what problem? People over in people in China are starving, so make sure that you finish your food. No, I'm just I'm kidding. But that's a way to put it in a relative view. That's what your parents were trying to do when they were trying to get you to finish your food it doesn't matter if you're hungry. Just finish your food. Don't waste the food. They were putting it in a relative view. And we need to do that with ourselves sometimes because we take a problem, someone cutting us off, for instance. It's like, is that really that important? Relative to what? Is because that person cut you off? You want to get upset about that? And that is going to impact your life in which way? Again, tell me. So that's what I mean by putting things into a relative perspective. On a scale, where does your thing actually fit on a scale? Like realistically, where does it actually fit? Not in a westernized society, not in a comfortable thing. Life is so comfortable and cozy society. Realistically, where does it actually fit on this scale? Most of the time, it is a 0.5 on a 0 to 10 scale. Most of the time. Sometimes it might be a 3, maybe a 2.5, but most of the time it's pretty low. And that is gaining perspective from a relative scale. Relative to what? Okay, the last one, the last Jedi mind trick that I like to use is my favorite one. It is literally gaining perspective on you. And this doesn't work for a lot of people because, well, partly because it's just hard to fathom these numbers that I'm going to talk about. It's just hard to actually think about them. People just have, once you get past, when it comes in years, once you get past like 1,000 years, people have a hard time understanding that perspective because we live to be 80 on average. So it's hard for us to gain a perspective on what 1,000 years or 10,000 years or 100,000 years or more might actually be. We can maybe get to 100,000 if we're lucky, but after that, it's like, that's just a lot of years. You're just putting zeros behind it, and it doesn't mean anything to me. But this one is very useful. So it's literally looking at the big picture. It's viewing and understanding that you and your current problem are but a fractal, teeny. It's just like a little tiny dot on the big picture of things in general. So there's two ways to view this. These are some of my favorite. I love the universe anyway. I love the stars. I'm a big fan of the stars and how it came about and the evolution of it all. So this is why this fascinates me. But there's two ways to view this. One is through the size of the universe, and one is through the number of years that this place has been around. So if you think about the size of what we call our home, which is the universe, the sun is but one star in the galaxy, in the Milky Way galaxy, which is where our solar system is. It is one star in the Milky Way galaxy. The best guess is there's between 100 and 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Between 100 and 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Okay? So one star, our sun, out of between 100 and 400 billion with a B. If you take that galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, that is one galaxy of somewhere in the range of 100 to 200 billion, with a B, galaxies in the universe, as far as we know. And potentially, this is relatively new, but potentially, the universe is just one of many universes. So, if you want to do those calculations, you're welcome to, but my mind can't grasp them. But I can certainly understand that is a gigantic number of stars out there available. And if there are that many stars out there, the likelihood that there's other life out there, number one, is super high. And number two, the simple fact that there are between 100 and 400 billion stars just in the Milky Way galaxy alone, and that there are between 100 and 200 billion galaxies in the universe, when you start to put those numbers together, I just kind of look at my problem and I go, all right, well, I don't know, doesn't seem that big. It just got small real quick. So then another way to view it is through years. Again, human beings live on average 80 years. The universe has been around about 14.5 billion years, give or take. The Earth has been around about 4.5 billion years. So you've only been here for very small fraction. I don't know what that fraction would even be. How long you've been here and you will be here. Once we're off of this earth, all of us who are alive today, once we're off of this earth, the earth will go on for about another billion years. And I say that because apparently the sun will continue to get brighter. And every billion years, it gets about 10% brighter. And in a billion years from now, being 10% brighter, the earth Everything on Earth won't survive that. So the Earth is going to go on for about another billion years. The sun's going to go on for, I forget, maybe another, I think it's 4 or 5 billion years after that. And the universe will go on for however many more billions of years. So if I haven't boggled your mind with numbers so far, if you want to, again, go think about whatever that might be, then recognizing, bringing it back in and realizing the big picture, you can look at the problem, or look at that person that cut you off, or look at the boss that's making you angry, or look at your spouse that, is just doing something that you just happen to not agree with. And you can kind of go, all right, well, I have a strange feeling that in a billion years, when the earth is on fire because the sun's too hot, that this isn't going to matter a whole lot. It's just not going to matter much. Just have a strange feeling about it. So I'm a little on the, whatever, masochistic side. That's why I like that perspective so much, because I can come down and I can go, oh, I can make this problem as big as I want to make myself feel good about it. But the when it comes down to it, it's really not, it's not going to matter in 1 year, much less 1 billion. And on the other side of that, the fact that we will be on this earth on average for 80 years, and the earth will continue to go on for another billion after us, maybe will help gain perspective on why it's so important to quit waiting around to do stuff. To quit telling yourself that I will get to it tomorrow. To quit convincing yourself that eventually I'll get there. Eventually I'll get the motivation. Eventually I will get the willpower to go. All you're doing is telling yourself that you don't have these things that are readily available to you if you just start doing them. If you just decide to start, and then the next day start again, and then the next day start again, and then the day after that start again. Quit fucking worrying about the rest of it. It's not going to matter. Do something. Go do it. This is my plea to you. This is my plea to you. Not because I think you're lazy ass. Because I know that you can do it. Because I know better. Because I've worked with thousands of people who have come to me and said, yeah, I'm just not an exerciser. And damned if a year down the road, all of a sudden, they were a different person. Because they quit fucking convincing themselves that I'm not that kind of person. They set that aside and they became a different person. That's why this is a plea to you to do it. Just do it. Start. Go. Quit convincing yourself. Quit getting in your own way. Quit blowing shit out of perspective. And recognize that it is all small stuff and that you can do it. That is my plea. That is my plea to you. To you. So, use these Jedi mind tricks on yourself whenever you need. It's going to be regularly. That's okay. But use them and be relentless on them. Go after it. Do it. Make the best of 80 years that you have on this earth. I'm sad. This, again, is masochistic, but I'm sad that in a billion years, I'm not going to be able to see what happens. That's what I'm most sad about. At any rate, get after it. Go do it. Go get it done. What do you got to lose? Get out there and do it. Until next time, step into growth.